Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Melissa.
And my name is Tracy, and we are excited to welcome you to this Round Trip Stories Customs episode. We learn so much when we step outside our own culture and customs to see things differently. It helps us get to know the world and ourselves a little better.
Just like you don't know what questions the customs agent is going to ask you in the airport, we don't know what we will be discussing in these customs conversations. We will simply pick a customs topic out of a virtual hat and see where the conversation takes us. Flight crew, prepare for takeoff. Okay, so we are back for our first 2024 customs conversation.
It's a new year and a new conversation.
Yes. So let's go. Let's just get right into it and let's see what our conversation today is going to be about. Drum roll, please. Bread and bakeries.
All right. Bread and bakeries.
I love bread.
Man may not be able to live on bread alone, but we all know that bread is a comfort food no matter what the culture. And who can pass a bakery without stopping to smell and take in the sights of soft or crusty treats? The grain-based yummies that provides the base for our meals comes in a menagerie of shapes, ingredients, and preparations. Let's hear some custom stories about bread.
So we've broken food down into several different topics because food by itself is just way too big. So specifically, we are talking today about bread and bakeries.
All right, Melissa, what's your story about bread?
Well, when we lived in Peru, the bread that we got to eat was so delicious. In the grocery stores, they would, so here in Fresno, in your typical grocery store, there is a bakery where they make cakes and cookies and maybe a few kinds of bread. So maybe you can get a loaf of French bread or you can get a loaf of sourdough bread or maybe some sandwich rolls. But like there's a few things to choose from, but not necessarily. And maybe muffins or different things like that, right?
Yes. Cupcakes.
Yes, right. So at the grocery store that was close to the first place where we lived, and really in almost any of the grocery stores in the cities there, and I'm talking about like supermarkets, so not the tiny ones, but like supermarkets. In their bakeries, they would have like 6 or 7 or 8 different kinds of small little like rolls, or like I feel like we would call them rolls, but like different kinds of bread, and they were all different. So some would be a little bit sweeter and some would be maybe crunchier and some would be um like flakier or whatever, or some would be butterier. Like they all had a slightly different flavor, and some of them and maybe some were fancier than others or whatever, but they were all baked fresh and they were delicious and they were cheap, and so we would buy them whenever we went grocery shopping. So in the supermarkets, maybe they would have a basket and tongs and you would like put them in your bag. But at the little stores, like the little neighborhood markets or the little neighborhood bakeries, they also had lots of yummy bread to choose from. And there was one in particular that we loved that was called Cappuccino Baguette. That was the name of this little
delicious.
bakery. It was, and their bread was amazing. But I was so proud and pleased with myself when I finally learned how to order at these kind of places where the bread was behind glass and you had to ask for the things. So a sol, the Peruvian sol, is their currency, and one sol is equal to about 30 cents. So 30,
Okay.
35 cents. So you can imagine, think of it as, a little more than a quarter. And what you would do, like some bread you could maybe get, 2 for a sole, and then others, maybe you could get 4, or others, maybe the really fancy ones were, 1 sole per piece or something. But what I finally overheard and learned from the other customers, what you would do is instead of saying, I want 3 of those, like at a donut shop here where you would say, I want, 2 old fashioned and 3 maple bars or whatever. There, what you would do is you would say, I want 1 sole of this kind of bread and 2 soles of that kind of bread. And so
Okay.
instead of saying specifically how many you wanted, you basically would just say, give me $1 worth of this and $1 worth of that or whatever. And then they would just give you however much you got for that, amount. And so I just felt
Okay.
so pleased when I finally learned how to order the bread at the bakeries.
Ah,
And
yes.
then, of course, even more pleased when I got to go home and eat it, and, it was delicious.
Oh, yes.
So what about you? What's your bread story?
We also enjoyed getting buns. So a lot of the bread in China is rice-based and they're steamed. And so you would go in a market and people have probably seen the cylinders. They're like the stacked trays cylinders. And so they're steamed
Yeah.
buns and they're one on top of each other. And as long as you have steam coming up, it can steam all of these buns at once. So that was cool going
Right.
past one of those type of bakeries because there was all this steam coming up. There's just towers of silver trays and all stacked on top of each other. So those were always delicious. And I also was fascinated by this, like a traveling bread guy, and he was actually, this was in Wuhan, but there were Uyghur people. So the Uyghur people are
Mhm.
from the west of China. China, how historically has, spread out, and they have gone west and south. To expand their territories. And so um, the Uyghur people are Muslim and they're from the Xinjiang province. We hear about that in the news. And
Mhm.
but they, being Muslim, right, just different types of food, different styles of dress, and so you see this. I saw this man, and he had his Muslim cap on, and he was had this pile of circle bread out, like pretty large, like a small pizza. And then, Melissa, when we were talking about this before, you're like, oh, like naan, and I thought, oh, well, I know that's Indian flatbread, and then we looked it up, and yes, that's what it's called. I always called it barrel bread because the way they would cook it, he had this barrel with coals underneath, and he would put the bread, slap it on the inside of the barrel, and then
That
it
is
would
so
cook
interesting.
on the side.
We're gonna have to put a picture of this on the post on the website and our social media posts about this because it really is such a fascinating thing to see.
Yes, and so that's why I would just sit there, and I often had children with me, curious little boys,
Mhm.
and so we would just sit and watch the man slap a
It's
circle
like
of
when you're watching somebody
dough.
make pizza or something, like,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah. So then it would, take a few minutes to bake and it rose a little bit and then it came out. And I don't know if often it would have this pattern on it, like these dots. And I don't know if that was the pattern on the barrel or he put a pattern on it and then he would sprinkle it with sesame seeds
Mm.
and it was delicious. So
Mhm.
everybody in our conversation, Melissa and I were like, well, where is that bread from? And so it's actually the word naan comes from is a Persian word. And it comes from the year 1300. And so then, bread styles travel, and especially because in Persia, they had portions of the Silk Roads, all the trade routes. And so not only do goods get traded, but also recipes, right? And
Mm.
ingredients and spices. And so
Mhm.
it traveled all the way to China.
Let's listen to the global stories our social media and email subscribers had to share with us about bread and bakeries.
Our first story is from Melinda Howe, who is quite a baker herself. And she said that when in China, I found a local baker who made and froze amazing pizza crusts. And Friday night became pizza night at our house. They were the best crusts I had ever tasted, and I have been working for years on recreating the recipe. I finally am pleased with my recipe. I so appreciated the bakery stepping out of their comfort level to give this expat a comfort food for her family.
Hmm.
You're going to have to send me that recipe, Melinda.
Yes, yes. That's fun. I know that my sister-in-law and her family, when they lived in Thailand, they had pizza night every Friday night too. But
Hmm.
I don't think they were making their own pizza. They were buying pizza. But yeah, those little things, they really are comfort factors for us, aren't they? Next, we're going to listen to Laura Lee share a story about her time serving in the Peace Corps and living next to a bakery. Listen in.
Hi, Tracy. Hi, Melissa. I have the best bread story from my time abroad. From 2004 to 2006, right after I was done with college, I lived in the Eastern Caribbean on the islands of Antigua, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer. So, I was stationed in a small little village on the island called Freetown, and I was a youth and community volunteer. And, I got to live with the host family at first, and then I found my own little house to rent. And this house, which was a little pink house, it just happened to be right next door to the village bakery. And the bakery was kind of like a small building, just a real simple, like wooden building, nothing crazy. Um, and right next door to it was my neighbor's house, and my neighbors were the bakers. And it was just really fascinating for me to see how their process. They had just mountains of flour, and they had a way of like making a little crater and then pouring in the wet ingredients and kneading and like rolling and baking, and it always, of course, smelled delicious, and obviously got fresh delicious bread every day. It was awesome. And then even like watching what they did with like the stale bread that wasn't sold, or just like turning it into bread pudding or using it in some other way to like make use of it. That was also pretty cool. And people could obviously come up to the bakery and buy the bread just right there. But what they would do is they'd load up all their fresh baked bread, and then they'd drive around the whole village and just honk their horn like in a like repetitive pattern, and then just like yell out something, I think probably like bread or whatever. And people would just shout out like, "Hey, I want some," and like come out and buy it. But the best part was on Sundays, because Sundays they made a special bread, and the special bread was bigger, and they had some kind of, I wish, it's been so long. I wish I knew what the difference is, but I think it was more buttery, or it had more lard in it or something. It was just heavenly. It was decadent. It was so good. And okay, so they would do this thing where they'd get like 3 ropes of dough, and they'd like braid it and put it on the top in the middle. And I can picture it in my mind right now. It's just so beautiful and delicious. And oh my gosh, people would be lined up on Sundays to get that bread. And I remember just being in heaven every time I ate it. And I was really into art at that time, and drawing and sketching and watercolors. And so One of my artworks from that time period of my life is Sunday bread. So that is my bread story. I will never forget my days as a Peace Corps volunteer, living next door to my neighbors and the bakers, and just all seeing bread, smelling bread, eating bread all the time. It was wonderful.
Thanks, Laura Lee. That sounds amazing. We loved your story. And everybody, you can check our social media and our website to see her drawings of the Sunday bread.
Our next story is from Chelsea. And when she was also living in China, she said that my kids and I did a science experiment using bread. The kids put their unwashed hands all over a piece of our homemade bread, then their water washed hands on a different piece, and then their soap and water washed hands on a third. We put each slice of bread into a bag and then we waited. Okay. After a few days, we observed colorful mold growing all over the unwashed hands bread, while there was very little on the water-washed hands bread and almost nothing on the soap and water bread. It was a great visual lesson about germs and hand washing, but no surprises. Friends in our same city in China liked our experiment and decided to recreate it in their home. They put their 3 sample bread slices in bags and waited and waited. After about a month, there was still nothing growing on their bread. It was still as white as fresh, or quote unquote fresh, as the day they bought it at the store. So that was store-bought bread. So this was a science lesson for adults where we learned just how many preservatives must be in that store-bought white bread to keep it fresh. Apparently forever. Yeah, so we gotta make sure that the retail bread stays on the shelves and will be purchased and doesn't get moldy, right? In any country we live in, we gotta make sure the stores have to make sure that the bread lasts a long time.
Yeah. Thanks, Chelsea, for sending us that story. So I got a little story from a friend of mine, my friend Kathy, who I go to church with, and Kathy's family is Khmu. So you may not have heard of the Khmu people, but they are originally from Laos. And when Kathy was 2 years old, she and her family moved to Fresno from Thailand, where they were living at that point. And then she grew up most of her childhood and is an adult now here in Fresno. When she was 13, she got an opportunity to go out to attend high school in Oklahoma. So she had been living here in California, but she got to go with a couple of other girls out to Oklahoma to live with a host family. So it's kind of like, like an exchange program, but I don't know that there
But in
was an
high
exchange
school
aspect of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And so she got to go live in Oklahoma with a Mennonite family. So the Mennonite Brethren is the church that I'm a part of. But it's a little bit different than sort of the like what people think of when they think of Mennonite. If they aren't familiar with, there's different types of Mennonites. Some are similar to what people think of when they think of Amish, and others are not. So, but anyway, so Kathy went to go live with these folks in Oklahoma, and one of the Mennonites around here and in other places like to make this really yummy bread. My mother-in-law makes it called swebak, and it's like a little roll with another roll stuck on top. So it's like a double, I think that's Zweibach, or however you actually say it in Low German, actually means maybe 2 buns or 2 breads or something like that. And and there's a tradition called faspa that you would have for Sunday supper. You would have faspa, and that would be Zwieback and some lunch meat and some slices of cheese. So just because you probably had a bigger meal at lunchtime. And so for supper, it's just a simple cold meal.
Okay.
And so Kathy told me this story about when she was in Oklahoma. And first of all, she couldn't pronounce sweetbox, so she just called it snowman bread because they do look like little snowmans. And how shocked she was one night when they were served the sweetbox and cheese and lunch meat for dinner. And she thought it was so strange. But the biggest problem was that she thought it was just an appetizer. So she didn't really eat very much of it. And then she found out later when it was too late that that was actually all that they were having, that was dinner.
Oh,
And she was
no.
starving that night. Yes. And this was in Corn, Oklahoma, and which was a very small town. And that particular Sunday, the only cafe in town was closed because it was Sunday. So she couldn't just go and get something to eat somewhere else. And, it was a learning experience to find out, what different people consider a full meal and when you're maybe not not expecting it. But I know that Kathy loves, she's very familiar with Sweetback now and loves them.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great story. Thank you, Kathy. All right. Well, my last little story is from my father-in-law, Juan. And he responded to our call for bread stories. And this is what he said. Well, let me preface this story with he is from El Salvador, and El Salvador is famous for their pupusas. Pupusa, okay? So it's basically you take the corn dough, right, like a tortilla dough, and you flatten it, and then you put something inside of it. So you, like in the middle of it. So it's cheese and beans, or pork and cheese and beans, or yuca, or some kind of mix. And then you cover those inner stuffings with the rest of the tortilla, and then you flatten it into a circle. And then you put it on a griddle and you cook it on both sides until everything's nice and cooked. So those are pupusas. And then you put this nice curtido over the top, which is like a coleslaw, but now without the mayonnaise. It has vinegar, and then a very thin tomato salsa on the top. So my father-in-law says, in response to our call for bread stories, and all he says are, but the best are the pupusas. pero lo mejor son las pupusas. Muchas gracias, suegro.
Yes.
We love stories from all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm. I just wish that we could sample the bread from the stories.
Yeah, I do too. And I propose we add one more category. We should talk about stuffed bread or stuffed something, because just like that pupusa is a stuffed tortilla, there's stuffed buns in China, and there are empanadas, stuffed pastries. We should make a whole episode about that. I think
we could. We'll add it to the very long list and see when it comes up.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
We heard bread stories from around the world. Just talking about bread makes us fondly remember times and places when we lived near bakeries, were empowered from communicating in them, or were so thankful for the comfort food they provided for our families. These bread stories have more ingredients to them than just flour, water, and salt. They are about history, immigration, science, and art. They're about humans thankful for the creativity of other humans, no matter where they come from, to help nourish their minds, bodies, and hearts.
We're so grateful to our friends who shared their stories for this episode. We believe that sharing stories helps our understanding of the world grow larger while the distance between us grows smaller. Come back next time to hear the round-trip stories from Mónica Baez, an international baccalaureate psychology teacher from Ecuador, who spent 6 years in the United States before returning back to Ecuador with a new blueprint for her life. To find out what stories we're collecting for our next customs episodes, sign up for our email list at roundtripstories.com or follow us on social media at Round Trip Stories Podcast. We would love for our listeners to hear your stories too. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time. Isn't it interesting how, like, there are just some things that bring us together? And I love how she talked about people just enjoying these things together and lining up together. And even, the cars, the trucks driving around. And don't you wish we didn't just have ice cream trucks here in Fresno? I wish we
Yeah,
had bakery
bread
trucks
checks.
and taco trucks and things, and that they would, like, not just park somewhere, but that they would drive around. Although maybe that
Yeah.
would be bad. I don't know, because
Oh, yeah.
I'd want to eat it all.